This video is about Triple Triad, but we're going to take a moment to get there, because I had something I wanted to sort of talk about. Have you ever played much Connect 4? I have no idea why these are circled. I just clicked like the first Connect 4 thing. But the basics of Connect 4 strategy are as follows. Oftentimes at the end of a game, the board fills up and you just start have to filling it in, and some of you and you've created threats here and they've created threats there, and sometimes your threat comes good and you win, and sometimes their threat comes good and they win. But there is a clear pattern to this. There are 42 squares, right? It is a 6 by 7 board. And that means when we're filling up at the end, first turn will fill up on odd rows and second turn will fill up on even rows. And this means it is second turn's objective to create even row threats, and first turn's objective to create odd row threats, while denying the other person threats of their preferred type. Now, of course, if you can create an odd and even threat, like two threats in a row, if I win here or win one square above it, or say I win like the second and third up from this, I can just start filling that in because I'll either win or you'll block the square and I'll win in the square above it. But in general, if we're both getting threats on odd rows, first turn's going to win. If we're both getting threats on even rows, second turn's going to win. You can let your opponent get 3 in a row lined at a target, but you just don't want it to be on the type of row that is better for them. Now, the advantage first turn has, and the reason that with correct play first turn is a forced win, is basically because the odd rows come up first, right? If I create a third row threat and I'm first turn, and you create a fourth row threat in your second turn, first turn wins. Okay. If you're actually good at Connect 4, you'll probably have a better explanation. But there's this really cool understanding that really advances your ability to do strategic things. You realize, hey, I'm on first turn. My opponent has lined up 2 on the third rank. I can let them get a third. That is not that scary for me to allow, as long as I don't let them get something on the second or fourth rows. I think this is really neat. I think it's one of those things that when you learn, the game starts feeling much less random and much less kind of who could create more threats and hope it worked out, and much more strategic and organized towards the goals of the game. And in Connect 4, first turn is a forced win. However, if you are not particularly good at Connect 4, and I am not particularly good at Connect 4, second turn often wins at lower levels of human play. If you basically haven't memorized or understood the ways for first turn to win, incidentally, the winning move is to go in the center, which you'd expect, second turn can be easier for humans to play. And the reason is first row threats are pretty easy to stop, right? I'm probably not going to be able to do much on the first row. And it is very easy for second turn to start getting second row threats. And here, first turn, I'm just playing random moves, has set up a fourth row threat. We should know that's not very good. But second turn already has 2 pieces lined up on the second rank, and this can prove very dangerous. First turn's fourth row threat, not so meaningful. Second turn actually, I'm not sure the exact valuation here, but second turn here now creates a fourth row threat. So both have a fourth row threat, but this is a huge advantage to second turn. Second turn is also ready to set up a second row threat on the columns 1, 2, 3, and 4. I would guess that second turn is doing fantastically well here, and it's really easy for positions like this to emerge because it is easier to make second row threats. First row threats usually are just easily parried, right? You can always block. So it really comes down to like second and third row threats are the first ones that are seriously made, and second turn has access to the first of those. And if first turn starts trying to make second row threats, they're mostly wasting their time. Um, well, if second turn gets a second row threat in return, second turn's probably winning. And we can sort of see, I don't know, let's fill out the board in some like plausible-ish way. I'll even be wasteful on second turn. They can throw away this. Now the right side of the board is almost completely blocked. Let's make sure kind of nothing can be built here. You can just see how it fills out. Let's block that diagonal. Oh, I got a 4 in a row by mistake. I did not mean to do that, but oops, I was not paying attention. All right, now we get mad. But I hope the point makes sense. I think in human play, before you are good at this, let's close this window. Oh, it didn't close for you. Well, I closed it. Before you are really good, or quite good, I don't know what the levels are of Connect 4, but before you are significantly better than the like small amount of work I've put in thinking about it, it is easier to play second turn, even though first turn is a forced win, because the kind of strategic concepts available are just easier to execute and they come through better if you're not that accurate. So I don't know how clearly I've said this, but I think Connect 4 is quite an interesting game. And I think having the odds and even rows and knowing which ones matter to you really opens up the strategic realm of it. But it leads to this really interesting feature where, at the kind of level where you've learned that and started applying it a bit, second turn starts winning more than first turn. And I have no idea what it does before you kind of learn guidelines like that, but I would guess second turn for a whole swath of beginner into intermediate players, second turn has an advantage. And that's what I was thinking when I looked at the Triad Wars 17 results in round one. I haven't checked the bracket, so I don't know if there are how many matches there are left, but we have 5 completed matchups. And in every single one, the decisive game was won on second turn. Now, we know that long term, first turn has an advantage in triple triad in games we have on record. Both in tournaments, in randoms, especially in closed random, but closed non-random as well. We know that first turn has an advantage. However, when you start getting rid of the wall rules, second turn starts catching up. And in fact, second turn often has better results with the wall rules off. What I think is the case is that, how to say this well, the less pieces line up into obvious patterns, the easier it is to play second turn. I think it is easier in triple triad to be reactive than to find something to do. And there are certain wonderful players like Chickeny who has said like he struggles with starters. And I think if you look at his games, basically the only games he gets outplayed are games where he really has trouble finding a good starter, and otherwise he is precise, he is really clever. He played one of the greatest moves of all time against Midas, um, possibly the greatest move we have on record, though Deli has some pretty cool moves too. um, and Seto had a really cool move. Anyways, let's not get distracted. Like, Chickeny is a phenomenal player, right? But I think he struggles with starters. And I think there's a whole swath of players, even if you're like widely a pretty good player at finding starters, there are hands that just like your brain shuts down and you don't find anything. And of course, there are starters against which you shut down, where you go like, I just feel like nothing in my hand clicks. And this probably happens more often in randoms than in hand games. But I think there's a sense that it is easier to react. When your opponent plays a card, you can now come up with plans against it, right? It is easier to go, okay, they played a corner starter. I have one side controlled, one side is a target. I should set up, one side is controlled, one side I can take, one side I can't. I should set up against the side I can't, right? This gives you a plan. This gives you candidate moves. You have something to base your logic around. On first turn, this is much harder. And another thing I've noticed is if we look at the first turns played, normally corners are most popular. We are not seeing a predominance of corners here. Sir Smokes and Vialva both began with corner starters, but Flair went in the side and went in the center. Addy went in the center twice. Forky went in the corner. I guess Cliffy went in the corner twice. Okay, so we are actually seeing corners. I am full of it. I drew a conclusion and then hadn't looked at the last few games that had come in, and that conclusion wasn't right. But so far the results are we have had 4 draws and 5 wins for second turn. No wins for first turn. It's kind of interesting. It's same plus plus wall combo. That is generally beneficial to first turn, right? Normally the more wall rules are in play, and that's the relevant wall rule. All cards must have a 1. This is kind of going to enforce some synergy for sames and pluses between cards. It's not going to help plus walls. Ones are pretty terrible for plus walls. This actually might be a sneaky nerf to plus wall. That's kind of interesting. Because if you have a 1 on the backside of your card on level 5, like your other numbers are like 7s and 6s. Maybe you go 7-7-4-1s. That's a kind of interesting decision. Maybe you do that. Smokes went for 7-7-4-1s, and I think Smokes is a player who has very good instincts for what to be doing. So that's a kind of interesting decision. But a lot of players, Addy went for a 7-7-5-1. A bunch of players have gone for 6-7-6s. Yeah, there's choices here. A bunch of players have run level 4s rather than level 5s, I think, to try to get a little more plus wall potential. Like 1754, 1764, that type of card. We are seeing kind of surprisingly often, which is another interesting thing to see. 1567s as well. But ones are kind of a difficult card for plus walls to occur. Max of 1 rare. We are seeing a bunch of rares. I do think if you I think rules like max of I've talked about this before, saying max 1 rare is a good guideline because then players will think they should use a rare and they almost never should. I am very confident that using rares here is really bad. like I bet you if we pulled up, say, one of the Addy Turds games and we swapped out the rare for like a normal card, the player in question would have more wins or ties or whatever. Like just mathematically, I think it's just bad decision. Um Smokes, who I think has very good instincts for laming, of course, did not use rares. Fialva did not use rares. Smart guys. Flare did Genji did use a rare. Boo. Dalamar also used a rare. Boo. Kick them both out. Addy and Turds both used rares. Balls used a rare. Forky did not. Good for Forky. He didn't win, but good for Forky. And DJ used a rare in the first game, and in the second game he did not. And guess which game he won? Yeah. I think rares are pretty clearly a mistake. It's just like such a low power single directional card. You could argue second turn doesn't have to use all their cards, but why would you want a dead card in your hand? I actually like it much more on first turn because it gives you a really weak corner that's just easily recapturable. But literally no one has started with it as a weak corner. Forky did the closest thing. He played 1116 as a weak corner, just using a level 1 to give himself a weak corner option, which is kind of like using a rare, right? You're using a garbage card, but he is getting it out of his hand immediately and giving himself something he can recapture, hopefully pretty easily. So okay, I think rares are a mistake. But the other thing, the last rule is max 2 cards above level 5. So it's level 1 through 7, max 2 cards above level 5. And yeah, split level sets. There's a very long-standing debate in Triple Triad history over whether split level sets favor first turn or second turn. I am usually on the first turn side of this equation. The argument for it favoring second turn is you simply do not have to use all of your weaker cards, right? You get to use your 2 strongest cards and you only have to use 2 of your weaker cards. The argument for first turn is your stronger cards are much more likely to be sweepers, right? Your stronger cards are going to be able to take things more easily because there are a lot of cards that just simply don't have as high numbers on the board. And in my evaluation, sweepers is the more important thing. However, if we look at the level 7s that are getting used, it's reliably the 886s, like 6818 and 1868. And those are very good at taking 1 or 2 things, but not actually incredible at sweeping, right? If there are a lot of 7s on the board, they never really combo against 7s, so they're not great at closing out wins. They actually often like want to be used a little earlier. So it's a sort of interesting card to land on. And if that is the right card for your level 7s, if those are the ones you should be using, that probably is not great for first turn having a huge advantage, which is kind of interesting. So I think level 1 through 7, same plus plus wall combo, open, should favor first turn, clearly. Max 2 cards above level 5, I think moves that down, but level 5s are really good at comboing level 5s, and level 7s are really good at comboing level 7s. 5 and 7 are two of the levels where cards have the most synergy with each other. This should favor first turn more so. However, in my opinion, and I think split levels tends to favor first turn as well. However, the exact cards we're seeing might prove my like instinctual conceptual judgment to not be concrete enough, to not be specific enough to what's going on. And all cards must have a 1 is a really interesting effect on that that hugely limits the amount of synergies we're going to see, right? They can't go 8-7-6-4s. They can't go, you know, 8861 seem very natural if you have to have a 1 on the card, right? There are not high synergy, high level cards. You also get 8851s or whatever, but you're not going to get these really dominant sweepers. So the thing I like for first turn in these split level sets might just be completely dissipated by the all cards must have a 1 rule. Maybe all cards must have a 1 is already enough to swing it to like both to change split level from, in my opinion, being somewhat first turn favored and just generally all rules open from being first turn favored. Maybe all cards must have a 1 is enough to swing both of those to being second turn favored. It also largely gets rid of plus wall, as I said, and getting rid of plus wall helps second turn. Max 1 rare shouldn't help either player. It should help smart players over buffoons like turds, right? It'll trick you into using a card you should not use, and some people will fall for it. Sir Smokes will not. Always have faith in Sir Smokes to lame properly. Whatever he's doing is like the baseline of what you should be thinking. And he's not going to put a ton of effort putting hands together, so you can certainly make a more optimized version. But wherever his instincts are is going to be a very good place to have your instincts. And he ran 7-7-4s and 8-6-8-1s, so I am fairly confident that is like close to correct. Yeah. So I guess that's it. But I thought it was really interesting that second turn was so absolutely dominant. And you could say like you could argue better players landed on second turns. And I think on average that's clearly true, but nowhere near enough to account for this big a gap. It's a small sample, obviously, but it just got me thinking about Connect 4, about how there are rule sets. Actually, maybe a fun experiment to do would just be put in one of the hands and see what the solver says. Because in general, on a normal starter, um, on a normal starter, about 2/3 of moves should tie. That's usually like the indicator of a pretty balanced game. So let's pick a game at random. I'm going to bring up random.org. And we have 9 games on the rule set, so we're just going to pick a number between 1 and 9. Number 4. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is the second game between Genji and Dalamar. And I have to type out the hands, but 7-1-6-5, 1-8-7-7, 8-5-8-1, 4-1-7-7, 3-8-2-1, boo rares. 1-8-5-8, proving I didn't cheat. I would have picked a game without rares if I was in control of this. But just as an interesting question of like, do you think starters are getting more or less of an advantage than usual? So in this game, 7-1-6-5 and 5, usually center starters are not so appealing. And we're indeed seeing a significantly lower rate of losses than usual. Your average like pressure starter, about a third of enemy moves should tie, and here it's 3 out of 40, which is strongly suggests second turn advantage. let's put in let's put in let's put in let's put in this first Smokes game because I think Smokes is he's the player I've complimented most today. Let's keep complimenting him. Um, and Smokes had first turn in the first game and did not lose. Um, and I think this may be an interesting thing to check. Smokes went in 9 as his starter with a 7-7-4. And yeah, it's immediately looking different. But even now, it's not that high a rate of losses. Ooh, a lot of losses in a row there. Okay, waiting for it to finish calculating. Okay, so even with Smokes, 15 out of 40 moves were losing, and 25 were ties. So 37.5% losing. That is above 30. But first of all, Vialva was using some lower level cards with some interesting synergies, right? There is reason to go for 7-6-4-1s. Though I think it's got to be a mistake. But you can see it playing off the there being more sixes than you might expect. Anyhow, but even Smokes playing with what's probably about as powerful a hand as is available and playing against a hand using some low level cards, even Smokes is only slightly above 30% here. His opponent's moves losing on the spot. We'll put in one more. Let's do I don't want a 5 starter. I think 5 starters are not. I mean, they're kind of fundamentally not great. But let's do one of the Addy Turds games. Turds also going with Oh, did I put the game in wrong? I put the game in wrong. Alright, one sec. I'm gonna go find the game in question. Have I been showing you weird things now? Okay. Let's go to Discord. Sorry about this. This is supposed to be a quick little video, but Alright, we need game 2 of Turds versus Addy. Oh, I clicked game 1 because I'm smart. One 845, 71469. Yeah. 15678. 86816, 18681, 77512, 77513. Ah, no, I didn't put it in wrong. I'm just an idiot. Okay. Sorry about this. This is great video. Doing great. Totally informed doing this. Okay. So Blue's hand is 7146, 8681, 7751, 417. Nope, that's the wrong game. 1393. And he's gonna claim that one in the game. 6818. Okay. Did I just close everything I was trying to have open? No. What did I just close? Oh, close the database. That's okay. This is the last game we're gonna look at. So Addy started in 5. It's our last check. And yeah, this is gonna be way under. So we're seeing way under 30% of moves lose, except from Sir Smokes, right? So this is one where 17.5%. So we saw 7.5, 17.5, 37.5. Very good odds that this is a good second turn rule set. This is just a really quick way to check, admittedly, but it's pretty reliable in my experience. So I think the Connect 4 analogy that we spent so long on, not correct. I think this is not Connect 4. I think this is a second turn favored rule set, and I think it's because the ones are really important to how kind of all of it works. It nerfs plus wall quite dramatically. It means the level 7s aren't sweepers, so the natural way that first turn dominates split level sets disappears. Yeah. And I think that's enough to make it a second turn favored rule set. Now, if we had this long term and more matchups and whatnot, do I think, it would be half ties, half wins for second turn, no wins for first turn? Of course not. But this is an interesting thing. I think we have a second turn favored rule set and one that I don't know I would have been able to predict as a second turn favored rule set. Really interesting rule set. Kind of kudos to whoever came up with it. You might say like bad work because it seems to be biased in one direction. Probably isn't as biased as it looks like, but does seem to be a little biased. But I would say a really interesting way to to nerf first turn's advantages. Really interesting. All right. I mean, I came into this video being like, Connect 4 is a good analogy. I bet this is a first turn favored set, but that in practice, second turn has an easier time, like in Connect 4. But that is not the case, I don't think. I think I was just wrong.